petitions outside of the arena. There have been people who want to boycott. We can see it here now outside the arena. You've got thousands of fans wanting to go in and enjoy a show. Some have never been to Eurovision before. Some are here for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be in the room where 160 million people at home will be watching. But just further on, you have pro-Palestinian protesters. And whatever you think of Eurovision and the events that are happening outside of the city, the thing that I'm seeing is just a sea of flags. You've got Palestinian flags over there, you've got people carrying their flags as they're going into the Eurovision Song Contest, and there are so few events in the world that can bring people together, but unfortunately this evening you can see a clear division.
How damaging has this been for the organisers, the EBU?
Well, they have been accused of a lack of communication, I think, especially when it comes to those pro-Palestinian protesters who say Israel should not be part of Eurovision. Those critics argue that in 2022, just days after Russia's invasion, they kicked Russia out after it invaded Ukraine. This time around, there's been a lot of controversy over Israel's participation as its ground offensive in Gaza continues, obviously in response to the October 7th Hamas terrorist attacks. The EBU says that in 2022, it kicked Russia out because its broadcasters broke its independence rules. They say this time, with Israel, the Khan, which is the Israeli broadcaster, hasn't broken its rules, so there's no reason to kick Israel out. But I think over this past 2-year period, they've not been clear with communication as to why they suspended Russia 2 years ago.
Okay, Daniel, thanks for that. Stay with us, of course, throughout this, because we want to get you back talking about what's happened in the Eurovision Song Contest here outside the arena. But my colleague Charlotte Gallagher is in the fan zone, about 20 minutes or so away from here. Charlotte, what's the atmosphere there like just before the whole contest is going to start?
This is actually the media zone, Mariam. So this is full of the hundreds.
Minutes away. Charlotte is in the media centre. It's just down the road. It's where I'm going to be watching the performance from a little bit later on. So where are you going to be watching the performance from? It's starting in about 50 minutes or so. What do you plan to do? Well, you know, there are pubs around the UK and there are places all around the world who are showing the Eurovision Song Contest for those fans who want to watch it in a crowd. There are also many people who've organised watching parties in their own homes with, you know, dancing and drinks and snacks and whatnot to watch it together with their friends. And I think we can go live now to one of those watching parties in Ollie Alexander, the UK's entry in Ollie Alexander's town of Coleford. Let's see if we can go live there and meet some of the people who are at that party. How is it all going?
Yeah, really good. We're just setting up now in the cinema, ready for our giant watch party, which has been sponsored by Coleford Town Council this evening, so free entry to all of our local residents. We have a pre-party going on in the Art of Coffee as we speak, so the sense of sort of, you know, excitement and the real kind of joy for Ollie representing us in the whole of the whole of basically the world, but on, you know, the global platform, it is just phenomenal for Coleford. You know, the community's got behind this. We're buzzing tonight.
The Mayor of Coleford, you must be so proud of Ollie and the way that he's representing not only the town but the whole country, and it's a great song as well.
And one more. Hip hip hooray!
Yeah, I mean, we're absolutely, you know, over the moon that Ollie is here on this global platform. Ollie's first public performance was here in the centre of our town at the Coleford Music Festival way back in the early 2000s. So, you know, it's great that we're able to do this tonight, and we wish him the very best of luck from everyone here in Coleford.
And we do.
Okay, well, listen, thank you very much indeed. Thanks so much to all of you for joining us. It's not too long now before Ollie gets to sing in front of the whole world. Yeah, 160 to 180 million people are going to be tuning in to the Eurovision Song Contest globally. It is a global music phenomenon, the biggest music contest in the world. And the city of Malmö has a really rich pedigree in hosting the Eurovision Song Contest. This is the third time it's being been the host of the song contest, and it's the 7th time for Sweden. Sweden, of course, are big into Eurovision. And 50 years ago this year, ABBA, the amazing super band, the global superstars, won the Eurovision Song Contest in Brighton. It was held in the UK that year, and I think there will be some sort of celebration here to commemorate ABBA and their victory that year. You're watching BBC News.
Mariam, thank you. Now to our main story today, and the Israeli military says about 300,000 Palestinians have left the city of Rafah since Monday, when Israel told them to move to a nearby district of Gaza. The Israel Defense Forces have declared a narrow coastal strip at Al-Mawasi to be a safe humanitarian zone, but the UN says it has no running water or proper sanitation. Israel is planning an assault on Hamas fighters in Rafah and has ordered tens of thousands more residents from eastern districts of the city to leave. Evacuation orders have also been issued for thousands of people in parts of northern Gaza. Last night, a US government report criticised Israel's use of American-supplied weapons in the Gaza war, saying it's reasonable to assess they have been used in breach of international humanitarian law in some instances. Israel launched its war on Hamas following their attack in Israel on October the 7th. From Jerusalem, here's our Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell.
Another desperate exodus. Palestinians fleeing in their thousands as Israel signals it's now set to push further into Gaza's southernmost city, issuing new evacuation orders. What should we do? Hanan asks. Do we wait until we all die on top of each other? We've decided it's better to leave. Israel has said it's taking action against Hamas in one of its last strongholds and trying to bring hostages home. With Israel's capture of one main border crossing and another blocked off by fighting, this is the 5th day with no aid getting into southern Gaza. There are now severe shortages of food, deepening the humanitarian crisis. So far, Israel's military is describing its offensive in Rafah as limited. But the world is watching to see if this turns into the full-scale invasion that the country's allies have warned against. And as Israeli tanks and troops await orders near the Gaza border, there's been another strong statement from Washington. It says that with some of its strikes on Gaza, Israel may have used American-supplied weapons in breach of international law. Israel has consistently denied any violations. And yet the new report may have an impact on plans back here in Rafah, where there's already a growing sense of emergency. Yolande Nell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
In Georgia, thousands of protesters have taken to the streets to take part in the March for Europe, demonstrating against the government's plan to adopt a controversial law on foreign funding. It comes after nearly 3 weeks of continual protests, with critics describing it as the Russian law, saying the legislation would target civil society and ultimately silence critical voices. The third and final reading of the bill will happen next Monday. Let's speak to our South Caucasus and Central Asia correspondent Rehan Dimitri, who is in Tbilisi for us. Rehan, welcome to you. Tell us what's been happening there today.
Well, what's happening right now behind me is Tbilisi's Europe Square. And this is where thousands and thousands of people have gathered tonight in yet another attempt to tell to their government that they don't want this law, which has been dubbed as the Russian law. It's a controversial bill that would target civil society organizations, but what people are concerned about is that it would shrink democratic space in Georgia, but most importantly, they're worried that if this law is adopted, that Georgia would lose an opportunity to join the European family, and that has been a national dream here for such a long time. At the end of last year, Georgia was granted EU candidate status, and since this government started talking about reintroducing this law on foreign agents, or as it's called this year, on the transparency of foreign funding, most of Georgia's European partners and European leaders, European institutions, the United States, both Brussels and Washington, they have been urging the government to reconsider and saying that this law is inconsistent with the European values and that it might really affect this country's chances of joining the EU.
Rehan, thank you. The Taliban in Afghanistan say more than 300 people are now known to have died in devastating flash floods in the north of the country. A spokesman for the Interior Ministry told the BBC that most of the casualties were in the province of Baghlan. Emergency teams have been sent to rescue those stranded by the floodwaters. On Friday, a massive torrent of water swept away hundreds of houses in several villages. Dozens of people are still missing. A little earlier, I spoke to our reporter Sofia Batitsa, who's been following the story. She gave us this update.
A state of emergency has now been declared in the part of the country in the north where the floods are taking place. So what has happened is that the northern part of the country has been hit by unusually heavy rain, and that has caused the flooding that we're looking at now. Now, the BBC has been sent videos and images from people in the area, and those show violent torrents of water sweeping through houses in several villages. There are people trapped in their homes, under the rubble, under the mud. Now, we don't yet know the full scale of the damage, but as you mentioned, the UN has confirmed that more than 300 people have died. More than 2,000 houses have been destroyed and many people have been left homeless.
And Sophia, just how common are these kinds of floods? What links are there to climate change? Do we know?
Well, there are many factors that contribute to flooding, but as you say, climate change is definitely one of them. And that's because climate change makes extreme rainfall more likely. Now, interestingly, experts say that Afghanistan is one of the countries in the world that are most at risk when it comes to climate change. It has been a very dry winter, and that means that it was difficult for the soil to absorb such a huge amount of water. But also, you know, we're talking about one of the poorest countries in the world that has been ravaged by decades of war. So when things like these happen, the country isn't exactly well equipped to deal with natural disasters. Now, in terms of what happens next, there is a big search and rescue operation underway, but there are many people who are still missing. So the fear is that the death toll could go up significantly.
Russia says it's captured 5 settlements in the northeastern Ukrainian region of Kharkiv since it sent troops over the border there on Friday. Ukraine disputes the claim. The local governor acknowledged heavy fighting was continuing, but described the situation as under control. More than 1,700 people have been evacuated. The US-based think tank, the Institute for the Study of War, reported that Russia had likely taken several villages. These are pictures of volunteers helping people in settlements around Kharkiv evacuate. Russia also claims to have captured a village further south in the Donetsk region. In the Russian-occupied city of Donetsk, the authorities say 3 civilians were killed and others injured in Ukrainian missile strikes, one of which hit a restaurant. Prince Harry and his wife Meghan are in Nigeria this weekend as part of the Duke's promotion of his Invictus Games. Earlier, Harry played a seated volleyball match with army veterans, many of whom were wounded in battles against the country's Islamist insurgency. Harry's team, dressed in yellow, took on a squad led by Nigeria's Chief of the Defence Staff, the country's top commander. The Prince's team took an early lead but ended up losing the match 25-21. For more on the tour, I spoke earlier to our Africa correspondent Simi Jalayoso in Abuja.
Well, the Duke and Duchess have had a pretty busy second day here in Abuja. They started off by meeting members of a local organization that they support called Nigeria Unconquered, which helps wounded and injured service members and veterans, a cause that we know is close to Prince Harry's heart. There he actually took part in a sitting volleyball game with the team, and they were really enthusiastic. They were chanting, "Team Harry, Team Harry." And afterwards, he and Meghan spoke to the families of those athletes. One girl offered Meghan a bouquet of roses, to which Meghan gave her a rose back and said that she was really happy to be there. Then afterwards, they attended a reception that was hosted by the Ministry of Defence. That ministry is behind their visit to Nigeria in the first place. There, the Duke of Sussex gave a kind of recap of his visit to a military rehab hospital yesterday. He said when he was there, he met 50 injured soldiers that were lying in their beds, and he said he could feel a sort of low morale in the room. But 2 of those soldiers stood out to him because they were smiling. He said one of them was even doing push-ups, and that visit kind of reminded him of why he started founded the Invictus Games Foundation. And afterwards, the Duchess Meghan, she attended a Women in Leadership event where she co-hosted with the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, and there she spoke about her Nigerian heritage. And the day she found out that she was 43% Nigerian, she said she was really happy, and the first thing she did was call her mother, and she just said that she was happy to be in the country and to find out more about her heritage as well as interact with other Nigerians. When she was asked whether she would come back, she said absolutely.
Barron Trump, the youngest son of the former US President Donald Trump, has declined to serve as a delegate at the Republican National Convention. The Florida Republican Party had announced that the 18-year-old would be among those selecting Donald Trump as the party's presidential nominee, but the office of former First Lady Melania Trump now appears to have shot down the idea, citing prior commitments. The Northern Lights might be visible in some parts of the UK again tonight after a stunning array of colours lit up the sky for many of us last night. One of the strongest geomagnetic storms for years meant they could be seen across large swathes of the country, as our science correspondent Palab Ghosh reports.
Technicolor skies not seen in parts of the UK for more than 20 years. This the scene in Jersey as a spectacular solar show was sent from the sun. The display is usually more visible in northern parts of Britain, but such is the power of the sun's current activity, it was seen in the south, even as far as Padstow in Cornwall. A more familiar sight further north in Crosby Beach in Liverpool, people gathered to watch. This was a Forth Bridge in Scotland. And in Newry in Northern Ireland, this was the scene. The colours are caused by solar storms on the surface of the sun.
The story started 93 million miles away and 2 days ago. And what happened was the magnetic fields on the sun rearranged themselves, releasing a lot of energy and ejecting billions of tons of charged particles out from the sun.
This is an actual video of the sun taken by a NASA spacecraft. When it's active, it emits really large clouds of particles called coronal mass ejections, like this one. When they reach the Earth, the particles energise the gases in the atmosphere, making them glow different colours. Oxygen glows green, while nitrogen emits purple, blue and pink light. Those in Scotland, Northern Ireland and the far north of England should be able to see the display again tonight. Palab Ghosh, BBC News.
The Eurovision Song Contest final gets underway in just over half an hour's time. Let's just show you the scene live outside at the event hall where it is taking place. It has been marred, it has to be said, by quite a few protests, pro-Palestinian protesters, many thousands out on the streets today, unhappy that Israel is being allowed to take part in the grand final. Well, do just check out our QR code there on your screen if you want to continue watching BBC coverage of the run-up to the big final event. Stay with us here on BBC News. Thanks for watching.
Hello. Well, the show's not over yet. We have both a music spectacle on and, of course, a light display in the heavens. And once again, Saturday night, a pretty good chance of catching a glimpse of the Aurora borealis or the Northern Lights. The viewing conditions will be good, if not excellent, across much of the UK with the clear skies. And try about 11 p.m. onwards, get your eyes used to that dark sky, away from any bright city lights if you can. Now here's the probability of the aurora occurring. This is just an approximation, so the red colours pretty much 90 to 100%, and then that chance drops off somewhat as you head southwards across the UK, but it really could happen almost anywhere, and there's some uncertainty even with that. Now, the weekend weather forecast, some uncertainty too, and the weather is going to produce a spectacle of its own. In fact, thunderstorms in the forecast for Sunday. Now let's get the outlook then for the rest of the evening and into the overnight hours. So let's take a tour across the UK around about midnight where we are expecting the clear sky. So you can see much of Scotland. The Aurora should be visible easily here, and certainly out of town. Beautiful displays of green and purple and violet. Also a chance of catching it further south. Very little in the way of cloud. If you are
This is BBC News, the headlines. The grand final of the Eurovision Song Contest gets underway against a background of protests against Israel's participation. The Israeli military says around 300,000 Palestinians have left the city of Rafah since it ordered them to evacuate on Monday, but the UN warns they're moving to an area which lacks basic infrastructure. Thousands of demonstrators in Georgia take to the streets of Tbilisi in the latest protest against legislation that would force organisations to declare foreign funding. Hundreds of people have been killed and thousands of homes destroyed by major flooding in northern Afghanistan. A state of emergency has been declared. And the most powerful solar storm in 21 years triggers celestial light shows in many parts of the world, with scientists expecting another display later this evening.
you.